Hello my dear friends, how are you? My name is Aesir and today I'm going to talk about the Matron Cult. I don't usually do this, but this video is a sort of attachment of the previous video, which is about the cult of the ancestors, honoring the dead. And if you go into this upper corner, you can watch that video where I have mentioned a couple of times the Matrone, the mother goddesses of the pagan Germanic tradition. So today I'm going to develop that subject. The matrons, also known as Matres and Matrone, are the mother goddesses of certain Germanic and Celtic traditions, to whom votive stones and altars were set up in their honor, somewhere between the 1st and the 5th century of the Common Era. Obviously, the name Matrone is in Latin because the invading Roman armies ended up settling in certain Germanic and Celtic regions and adopted the cult of the local mother goddesses. Thanks to the Romans, we know about the existence of these ancestral female spirits, otherwise they had been forgotten. The inscriptions on votive stones and altars are in Latin, but the names of the local deities are Germanic and Celtic. The Matrone can either be a representation of the triple aspect of the mother goddess, or can be representations of 3 mother goddesses in the area, which is why we end up with 1,000 goddesses names, if not more. The matron cult is not exclusively Germanic, but also strongly evident in Celtic areas, mostly northern Italy and eastern Gaul, but as it is to be expected, this cult was extended to other European realities. The votive stones to the mother goddesses are almost exclusive from the places occupied by Roman armies, and on the other regions where the Romans were never able to settle, especially the eastern bank of the Rhine, these goddesses simply do not appear. That doesn't mean that this cult and the mother goddesses did not exist in such areas. As I've said, we know about this cult only due to the votive monuments raised by the Romans. We nowadays are so worried about cultural appropriation and to be faithful to the true traditions of a specific culture, but the matron cult is a perfectly good ancient example of the syncretism between cultures. In this case, Roman, Germanic, Norse and Celtic religious concepts. The illustrations of the matrons on the votive stones show these ancestral spirits almost exclusively in groups of 3. They are usually depicted with headdresses showing a stage after reaching womanhood, becoming married women, and also being girls with loosened hair showing their condition as maidens, unmarried women, and the juvenile stage of a woman's life. The motif of the triple goddess was a religious phenomenon very widespread in ancient Europe, comparable with the goddesses of fate, such as the Moirai, Parcae and the Norns, also represented in the same manner: a young maiden, an adult woman and an old woman, future, present and past. The functional aspects of the matrons were mainly connected to protection of the family, fertility, childbirth, and sometimes also as war goddesses. But this last aspect is more noticeable in Scandinavia, in the cult of the Disir, which to a certain extent are the Norse equivalent of the Germanic Matrone, and the mythological female beings of the southern Germanic regions known as the Edisi, similar to the Norse Valkyries. In their votive stones we often find depictions of snakes, which may refer to an association with the souls of the dead or the underworld itself, but also aspects of protection and fertility, represented by the serpent symbolism. Other motifs include depictions of activities performed during sacrifices, such as burning incense, slaughtering pigs and other animals, bowls filled with fruits and decorations of fruits, plants and trees. Most of the offerings given to these goddesses or placed in their votive stones and altars were consumables, fruits, fish and meat. The worship of the matrons is a phenomenon basically limited to Upper Italy as well as the occupied parts of Germania and Eastern Gaul during the Roman Empire. As I've said previously, the sole source of information about the Matron cult comes from the inscriptions on votive stones and votive altars. Most certainly the Matron cult was extended to various European tribes, but it was the Ubii, a Germanic tribe of the western bank of the Lower Rhine, that seemed to be much more concerned with this particular cult. There is always that idea that everyone was in a patriarchal society, especially when speaking about Germanic tribes. But as I have said before many times, not every Germanic, Norse, or any other European culture for that matter, subscribed to the same religious beliefs, nor did they live in societies whose basic structures were patriarchal in nature. There were many cultures and many tribes within cultures that lived in matriarchal societies, a form of society in which inheritance runs via the maternal side of the family and which also shows other matriarchal tendencies. Many societies worshipped as their main deities some sort of mother goddesses, either earth goddesses or solar goddesses. It was not uncommon. In fact, this may explain why one of the many reasons of the war between the Aesir and the Vanir in the Norse mythology. Clearly a conflict between the patriarchal Aesir and the matriarchal Vanir. The monuments of the Germanic matron cult were set up by the Roman adherents to the cult, in particular by Germanic legionaries in the Roman army, which made it possible for this cult to spread to the borders of the empire in Scotland, Phrygia and southern Spain, and even to Rome itself. It is difficult to perceive the origins of the matron cult in the Roman religion of imperial times, but most likely it came from Gaelic and Western Germanic religious beliefs concerning mother goddesses. But it is possible that the protective and fertility aspects of these mother goddesses came from this Celtic, Germanic, Roman mixed culture, and that the origins of such mother goddesses were much more warlike in nature, as we can see in the Scandinavian equivalents, which seem to have retained more of the original functions of such ancestral female spirits. Both the Norse Disir and the Valkyries are intimately connected with war, conflict and fate, but also the protectiveness of the family. It's difficult to be certain of the functions of these mother goddesses, because certain votive stones depict specific local goddesses, others depict general war goddesses within the Celtic and Germanic pantheons, and then there are the cases of votive stones set up after the fulfillment of a vow, which clearly depicts mother goddesses of a specific family, hence the idea of the matrons being guardian goddesses or ancestral spirits of the family. Clearly there were different goddesses for very specific purposes, and the matrons may not be mother goddesses, but seem more likely to be the general group of female beings, including all sorts of goddesses, female land spirits and female ancestors and so on, much like the Norse Disir. The illustrations of the Matres and Matrone are usually frontal depictions of these female figures, almost exclusively in three, either standing or sitting, with at least one of them having a basket of fruit on her lap. Sometimes the middle one is shown to be a maiden, suggested by her loosened hair and wearing a headband, while the others are represented with headdresses, suggesting married women. Sadly, there is no information about when the cult of the matrons was performed, although we have some indications of the Angles, for instance, celebrating sacrificial feasts at the beginning of the year, which is during Yule-Tide. Sacrifices very similar to the ones in the matron cult, offerings of fruits, fish and meat, sacrificing animals, burning incense, and the similarities between religious symbolisms. There are other similarities in other cultures, for instance in Scandinavia. the sacrifice to the Disir, Disavlot, which, according to the Icelandic sagas, it took place at Veðranotum, that is, at the beginning of the winter, in mid-October. And the fruit basket depicted in the Matron Cult and referred to in Anglo-Saxon and Norse celebrations may point to an autumnal sacrifice at the very end of autumn, after the harvest, which was precisely after the harvest festivals that the Disavlot celebration was held. Right, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this short video. It's an attachment to the previous video, which is very long, and I do recommend you to watch that one to know more about the cult of the ancestors and honoring the ancestors. So, thank you so much for watching, see you on the next video, and tack för idag!